Hello and welcome to Workplace Makers with Nina Fountain. This is the podcast that gets to know the people creating workplaces we aspire to. It's about achieving the ultimate win, a workplace people are drawn to wherever they work from, and discovering how we can remove limitations to enable people to be their best through workplace innovation and design. I'm your host, modern workplace consultant Nina Fountain. Join me as I unlock the secrets of attractive, productive, and engaging modern workplaces. Today, it is an absolute pleasure to have John Baldoni on the show. He's an internationally recognized keynote speaker and author of 16 books that have been translated into 10 languages. He's considered a top thinker in leadership and management by Thinkers 360, who named him in their top 10, by global gurus who've named him in their top 15, and he's listed in the International Federation of Learning and Development's Hall of Fame. The accolades go on. He's a top 100 speaker, a top 50 leadership expert by Inc.com, and has received a Lifetime Achievement Award for Trust. John's also a member of the renowned 100 Coaches, founded by Marshall Goldsmith, which is a group of executive coaches and thought leaders from the worlds of business, academia, and social service. So, John, welcome to Workplace Makers.
Nina, thank you for that warm welcome. The honor is mine. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. Can't wait to dig into some of your experience and how that relates to the workplace. But let's start by understanding how you got interested in leadership. What was it that drew you to this work?
Well, I have to be honest with you. Leadership as we know it is very much a fad. So what do I mean by that? Leadership is actually time immemorial. We, dates to prehistory, of course. But the leadership we know it within the corporate sector, organizational culture is within the last 40 years. And so I began my career in marketing communications, eventually became a senior level speechwriter. And so in the either late 80s or 90s, I was asked to write speeches on leadership. And so I became infatuated with that topic. And so I went back to school and did a master's and studied lots of things about it, began writing on it. But I was taught, while the word leadership was not in my vocabulary as a young person, I was certainly given that example by my parents. And then, of course, through my education, I was educated by the Jesuits, who drilled what it meant to serve others, which is a form of leadership. And so that's where my origin begins.
Sounds like a life journey in a way. Yeah. This is the culmination of many points of interest over your life. And now you've written 16 books. So which one was your favorite to write?
Oh, that's like asking, what's your favorite grandchild?
Favorite child, yeah.
Yeah, favorite child, favorite grandchild. Oh, it's always the last one. And so it's probably Grace Under Pressure, certainly. So that's the book I'm talking about today. And so obviously it's my favorite. I've written a number of books. I started writing about leadership communication because that was my original career, obviously going from speech writing. That made sense. And then I started exploring the topic of purpose and how it affects us. And then somewhere in the late teens, I became interested in a topic that I had explored before, and it actually was dormant probably throughout my life, which was the topic of grace. And so I wanted to explore grace in a secular sense as a power and a catalyst for good. And so I wrote a book in 2019, which was called Grace, A Leader's Guide to a Better Us. And got good reviews and all that, but it did not sell because who in 2019 cared about grace? Well, come 2020 and the time of the pandemic, everybody cared about the caring and connection. And so it became a little bit more popular. And then I wrote a second book, which is a series of reflections, which is more in poetic form, called Grace Notes, which reflects my interest in music, but art, and as well as trying to express things in a more poetic form. But I wanted to give the idea of grace some muscle. And so a couple of colleagues recommended this topic. Well, how about the phrase grace under pressure? And that comes from Hemingway. And he wrote it in a letter to Dorothy Parker, who was a contemporary author of his in the 1920s. And then John Kennedy's speechwriter, Ted Sorensen, came across the phrase, and he used it in the foreword to the book Profiles in Courage. And so what Hemingway described Grace Under Pressure. And the way Kennedy used it was keeping calm in times of crisis. Now, certainly Kennedy knew all about that because he was certainly a bona fide war hero. And the Second World War, his PT boat was shot out from under him, as he said, but he spent a number of days stranded on an island and would swim out to shark-infested waters trying to flag down an American ship to rescue them, and eventually that happened. So anyway, knew all about what it meant to be calm in times of crisis. And so I think that's what we're looking for right now, because our world has been turned upside down in the wake of the pandemic. And so the theme of Grace Under Pressure is what do leaders, the subtitle is Leading Through Change and Crisis. So what do leaders do? Well, they do three things. One, they take care of their people, they take care of themselves, and then they prepare for the future. That's not rocket science. Everybody does that. But I think what's more important is the human element, and that's what we're looking for right now. It's the commitment, the courage, the candor, the compassion that leads to connection, and a very another important C word, community. We are looking to this sense of belonging. And that's what's important. Here in the States, what we have, sadly, is an epidemic of loneliness. And I think that probably pervades all throughout the Western world and maybe the whole world. Who knows? But what we're looking for is a sense of belonging. I want to be able to contribute. I want to feel that I'm here. And I think that grace, very much so, is the facilitator of that sense of community. And so that's a topic that I explored in this book.
Wonderful. I wonder if you could give us a snapshot understanding of how you see grace. How would we know it if we bumped into it?
Well, that's a very good question. I do a LinkedIn live show called Grace Under Pressure. Imagine that. I could actually match the two titles. And I've done over 200 shows, and I've asked every guest to tell me a story about grace in their own life. And there have been stories that have been simply examples of transactional things, like I remember I was caught in a rainstorm and someone gave me an umbrella. Okay, but it stayed with them. More transformational, I talked to a combat veteran who actually was saved by, he considers, an act of grace, and he is with us today and is now 80. So that's a pretty good example. Other things and this is maybe not common, but what we see was a woman told me about an example where her mother was taken very ill, and her boss said, look, go and go now, and you have to do one thing for me. I'm paraphrasing here. Do not think about work. Focus on your mother and your family and yourself. So that took, she was a professional woman. And so, and then, we professionals pride ourselves on being able to multitask and all of that kind of stuff. But her boss took that off her plate. And that is an act of grace. So an act of grace is an act of kindness. It's not random. It's not random acts of kindness. It's intended acts of kindness. And this gets into the sense, we have this during COVID. Well, I want our leaders to have empathy. And empathy is that sense of, I can feel another one's suffering. I can also feel another one's joy, take pride in, take sense of that. But there's something more that it's a leader's responsibility in such things, and that's compassion. And what is compassion? Compassion is the expression of empathy. It's doing something for that person. As I told you about that boss that said, go and do not think about work. That is a simple act, costs nothing, but it focuses on the human being. That's what we want. That's what we're looking for. And what that fosters is the sense of belonging. We all want to be part of a community, even if we think, well, I'd like to be an individual, whatever. Yeah, but not really. You want to have your tribe, your people that you can connect with. And that's important.
On Maslow's hierarchy of needs, isn't it? Belonging is one of our fundamental needs on Maslow's hierarchy.
Absolutely. And belonging is rooted to our value system, the values that we hold within our community, within our workplace. And I believe grace facilitates that. It facilitates that connection, our ability to relate to one another as human beings. Now, when I say community, that doesn't mean everybody thinks alike or does alike or is focused on everything the same thing. No, there's individuality, which is important, and individuality nurtures the sense of community. As a matter of fact, it makes it stronger because we're not automatons. We're able to express our individualism, yet we feel we belong someplace. Amy Edmondson, the Harvard professor, talks about psychological safety. It's fundamental to community.
It'd be great to draw some lines here around that experience of community, connection, belonging, finding your tribe that you're discussing and or are really raising for us, and what that could look like in the workplace and in the modern workplace, especially where leaders are often working now with a hybrid workforce where people are not in the office together all the time or quite as often. What are your thoughts on what it looks like in this space?
Well, Nina, you raise a fundamental question that we're all wrestling with. So if I had the answers, I sure as heck wouldn't be talking to you. I'd be cashing checks for millions of dollars. No, seriously. I've talked about Cali Williamson Yost, who focuses about the future of work. And I've had her on my show a couple of times. And she talks about one size does not fit all. So hybridization is here to stay. There will be some areas of a business that may be 9 to 5. I mean, if you're in healthcare or retail or whatever, there's going to be that 9 to 5, or daily work 5 days a week. But others, so IT, they can work remotely for long stretches of time. But, through things like Agile, they come together for sprints and things like that and to focus on that. So 2 days a week in the office or 2 days a month, whatever it is. Whatever it is, we still need to foster that community. Now, you can very definitely foster community through video chat. And I will tell you, I am a living example of that through the organization to which I belong. You mentioned 100 coaches. We fostered, I had been a member before COVID, but we fostered our membership very strongly through video when we were all dispersed. But we now, in the last couple of years, we've been able to get together. We just had 10 days ago, we had a great get together, which was wonderful, that face-to-face connection. But we're still remote. We're all literally a global organization. Coming together is important, but we stay connected through our outreach to one another, and that's through virtual communications. Now, we're human beings. We are wired to the face, the human face, the connection. There's nothing that's going to supplant that because, as Amy Cuddy has written, that our sense of physical presence, we sense one another. We're still animals, and sometimes we behave more like animals rather than humans, but there's that biological connection there. We feel that you cannot replace that in a video screen yet. So maybe with holograms someday, who knows, but that'll be past my bedtime. So, but I think what the challenge for leaders is, how do I foster community? How do I foster engagement when I have a workforce which is together and not together? I coach senior leaders. It's maximize the face time, make the best of it, do what you do, and then enable people to determine, as long as they're contributing to the greater good of the organization, productivity, and all of those things, to work at their own pace, so that type of thing. So it's not an easy answer. And again, as Cali Williamson Yost says, it's all about that sense of one size does not fit all.
She's a fantastic voice for smart, sensible, wise approaches to flexible workplaces. She's really been leading in that space for many years now. So
exactly. Yeah. And she said something to me. This was the first time I interviewed her. It was maybe 2.5 years ago. She said, the hybrid workforce, COVID accelerated it. It did not invent it. It has been there for a long time.
Talk about perhaps some of the things that workplaces have done that we could learn from in the negative. Sometimes we learn from our mistakes. We learn from others' mistakes.
You're singing my song. I used to do an exercise about when I did leadership, say, write down everything you had about a bad boss. And everybody has something. Negative experiences can be a very good teacher. I think that's how the human race survived, That is a saber-toothed tiger. Do not get too close, because if you do, you won't be here tomorrow. So we quickly suss out our bosses. I always like to say, few of us, if any, actually go to work to say, I want to fight with my boss today. Of course not. That leads to stress. Yet, so often we have bosses who do not focus on the human dimension. Basically, in a lot of ways, is because they're ignorant. And I don't mean that they're lack of education, but they're ignorant in human relations. Maybe because they haven't had good role models. So they act as they have been treated. That was the way it was when I started in the workforce 40 years ago, 45 years ago. Today, we have a much more educated workforce. So we still have jerks at work. We still have jerk bosses. We probably always will have that. But if people don't matter, that's when you get in trouble. And I think the concept is the dignity of work. We have lost that. We too often ignore it. When you hire someone to do a job and you provide them with the resources to do it, respect them for what they are doing. And in return, ideally, they will respect you. Now, if they throw things back in your face and you provide opportunities for them, then it's not a good fit. And so you have to spread. So there has to be reciprocity in the workforce. But I always say when there's a dysfunctional workplace, you always have to look at the boss first, because that's where the buck stops.
I adore that phrase, the dignity of work. There's something very powerful about that. Work can lift people up.
In my book, I have a whole chapter on dignity, and I got that from, the topic has been around, but a colleague of mine, Tasha Urich, who wrote a wonderful book called Cites about self-awareness and the lack of it. She was talking about the dignity of work, and it's rooted in what we do. And I think then it's coupled with respect, in the sense of, what is respect? It's looking at an individual, as a person, as a contributor, as an asset, how he or she can help build the organization. And you, in turn, as a leader, how can you enable that individual to succeed?
Are you seeing any mistakes that employers are making in this current environment, where they're challenged with hybrid, with remote?
The biggest sin is the violation. I'll call it the Cali Williamson Yost principle: is one size fits all, which is the opposite of what she teaches. We're all going to come back in the office and we're all going to be happy again. Well, I remember asking, now this is a couple years ago, an IT executive. I said, what would happen if you had a mandate that everybody comes back to the office 5 days a week? And he goes, I'd lose all my employees. So bingo. But the fact of mandating everybody come in person 5 days a week, that's not sustainable. People have learned how to be productive away from the office. Now, as an employer, you can ask people, mandate, require people to come to work at a designated time frame. And so I'm an employer, they are paying you to do this, so you are obligated to. But if you want to do a hybrid or a virtual and the requirement is 5 day week, that's not going to work. So you have to find your place in the workplace, as does the boss. So I think we're still feeling this out. We're coming down. I think we're going to end up with 3 day in-person weeks for office workers. Now, here's the thing that nobody talks about. I did mention retail and healthcare, but manufacturing jobs, these folks have been working 5 days a week in the office, in their workspace, construction, whatever. You don't work construction virtually. So how about those folks? How are we going to create conditions for them to do their best when if one half of their workforce gets to work from home and they have to be in place? So this is a period of adjustment, but I think it's for the better, because we'll figure it out and we'll be stronger for it. And one of the things I always like to say is that we went through the most significant upheaval in the workplace dynamic, certainly in my memory, and who can remember before that? If they can, they weren't around. And we survived. And not only did we survive, we thrived and we figured it out. We human beings are pretty clever creatures. We're also resilient. And I think that's an important part. We learned that we can cope with adversity, and we learn from it, and we make it work for us. So that's a strong lesson.
It's absolutely been a testing time, and one that's potentially forged new practices, new ways ahead that we can then tap into for the future. So what in general have you seen makes the difference between a workplace that doesn't attract people and isn't likely to retain its staff, and a workplace that does attract a crowd and is somewhere people want to be? What have you seen makes the difference?
Well, assuming that compensation is fair and equitable and people feel that way, it's what you said earlier. It's belonging, or as I would say, community. I feel that I belong here. That's not a revolutionary concept. That's time immemorial. And as a matter of fact, Marcus Buckingham wrote a book about it. First Break All the Rules. Why people left the Gallup study they did is because they felt they didn't really have a friend or somebody at work, whatever. They didn't trust their boss or didn't connect with their boss. So we all want to belong. And so if I feel my boss cares and I feel that my organization cares and I feel that I have colleagues whom I can trust, I will stay. I will want to stay. Many of us, let's be honest, are in jobs that, aren't our favorites, but we do it. We stayed for reasons of compensation, security, insurance, or whatever, those factors are. But what makes the difference is people feel that they belong.
That's a really key point when decision makers are sometimes needing to make an unpopular decision. People have quite strong opinions about where they work and their ways of working. They tend to feel a sense of almost a right around this.
Well, I think it gets down to dignity. If they treat me with respect and dignity, I can do this. At the same time, there has to be reciprocity. You have to. Employers are paying you, so they are within their rights, as long as you know the job scope, to ask you to do the job you're hired to do. Now, if those specs change, different things come in, a new boss, whatever conditions change, that's when friction occurs. And just like friction in the sense of physics, it's drag. And so if I'm discontented at work, I'm not going to be at my best. I'm going to be looking over my shoulder out of fear or whatever. And so comfort is good, and that's fine. But there's the concept of creative tension. Now, creative tension is working toward deadlines and joint goals that we all pitch in together, and it's hard work, and there's a reward for us. That's great, okay? So you want people to feel safe, but it's okay to challenge and nurture and provide, as long as you provide them with the conditions that they can succeed. And those who achieve more will be rewarded either compensation-wise or through promotion, whatever it is. Give people, be fair and equitable. So equitable doesn't mean everybody gets paid the same, but it means you provide that equal conditions to succeed.
There's so much in that, isn't there? There's a real need to look at leadership and how leadership occurs. What are the conditions that are being created for people? And part of that, I think, is the space and the ways of working. They often really affect the culture of the organization. These are high stakes decisions that leaders are making. You advise executives in your work, and one of those key things that leaders need to do is make decisions, as you said, preparing for the future, preparing for themselves, looking after their people. And with so much on their plate and a sense of burnout across the workforce, leaders could be in that situation of feeling burned out. How do you advise them to prioritize their day or prioritize their decisions? Let's talk about that.
Well, I'm glad you isolated that, Nina, because that is the weakness. I mean, well-intended leaders are good at taking care of their team, and they're great at preparing in the future. They can often be lousy at taking care of themselves. Why? Because leadership by nature is outward directed. We too infrequently look at ourselves. But it's like the old axiom. In a depressurization situation in an airplane, parents, put your mask on first, then the child, because you can't optimize unless, you are receiving that oxygen. Yet, time and time again, leaders sacrifice themselves. We see this Very, certainly in the US, the sense of burnout, which is most acute in healthcare because we have stretched our healthcare, certainly during COVID, stretched them to the limits by overworking. And because conditions got so bad and there was negative reception, sadly still negative perceptions of healthcare from our community, that, there is burnout and people feel that they're just not getting it. So the key to combating burnout is self-care. So what does it mean? And in my book, I deal with this. It's a sense of self-resilience. I quote and use the work of Dr. Sharon Melnick, who is a clinical psychologist and fellow member of 100 Coaches. And she's written a couple of books on resilience, and it's that ability to take care of yourself. But what Sharon advises, she goes, leaders are always on, and they have to treat that way, but you have to turn things off. And what happens to burnout is people work ungodly schedules and they just get stretched and stretched and stretched. And I use this term certainly not scientifically, but over time, if you're working too many hours a day and extended periods of time, what you become is an awake drunk. You're not high, you're just inefficient. So a task that should take an hour will take you 3 hours. You're also distracted. Your emotions are frayed. You are not at your best. And so these things weigh on you. So self-care is important. Self-care, diet, exercise, things that no one's ever heard of before, but also things that help: mindfulness, meditation, breathing, yoga, all this. And, some places just take a colleague of mine, Donald Altman, who's written extensively. He's a therapist, but also writes on the topic of mindfulness. He calls taking the pause. What is the pause? You're working on something, step away, look out the window, go for a quick walk, go walk down the hall, just get away for a moment, break, okay? Deep breathing, when we breathe from our diaphragm, it's a yoga exercise. When I breathe from my diaphragm, I feel more centered physically. I can feel my body there. And that's part of the other thing about resilience. We're always in our heads, which is fine, that's what we're paid to do. We lose track of our physicality. And I once had the opportunity of teaching a series of courses with a dance troupe. And one thing I learned from them was the power of physicality. We know this from our pets. If a dog or cat gets sick, what do? They go in a corner and recuperate. We humans, what do? Oh, I'm just going to gut it through, okay? And we prolong whatever illness we have and maybe catch another illness. So we have to learn to shut down these things. And so taking care of self. And we often feel somebody goes, well, I can't take a break because my team needs you. Yeah, they need you, but they need you at your best. And if you think they can't get along without you, that's a problem. So you need to get a number two, get a backup, get all these kinds of things so that you can be at your best. And that's, again, why we need community, people who can back us up. People can say, Nina, I see that, you're feeling some real stress today. Why don't you take today off? Why don't you ease off today? Why don't you come back tomorrow? Why don't you come back next week? Whatever. And we'll cover it. And then what your obligation is, Nina, you do the same for me sometime in the future. So that's how we care for one another.
Great set of tips there. Thank you, John. And one of the other things I'm seeing, this is not new, this has always been the case with leadership, that there's resistance to new ideas, to new programs. And right now there's a huge amount of resistance, as you talked about earlier, to coming back into the office. What are your tips for fantastic leadership of workplace change in general?
Well, basically what you're harkening back on is the very old concept. Change is good, but you have to change, Nina. I don't have to change. I'm fine. So change is good for you, but not me, because I'm comfortable where I am. There's a novel concept that I urge every leader I work with to do. How about talking to your employees, and how about listening? Have you ever heard that? So seriously, simply listening. And what is it you want to do? Oh, well, I'd like to work 5 days a week. I'd like to work 1 day a week. Maybe we'll figure it out. And you're not going to please everyone. And that's fine. But you are, as the boss, are entitled to set the structure for the workplace, and people have to abide by it. If they don't, And hey, as Alan Mulally, former head of the CEO of Ford, always likes to say, hey, I love you, but if you can't get in part of the system, I'm going to wish you good luck and help you get a new job. I like to say leadership is all about you, but it's not about you. So what do I mean by that? Leadership is about putting people into positions where they can succeed, and that's other directed. But leadership is all about you because you create the conditions, you, the leader, create the conditions for people to succeed. So it's that yin and yang. It's back and forth, back and forth. So, but as Alan Mulally likes to say, we're here to love and to serve. Love the people for what they do and they can do, and serve them, serve them, serve them. You create those conditions where they can succeed. So.
Brilliant. I'm so glad we're having this conversation, John, because it really highlights how leadership is one of those critical conditions. And so what are you excited about as we look forward to the rest of the 2020s in today's workplace?
I was interviewed last year by a college student who was saying, he said, now, Mr. Baldoni, what are your long-term objectives? And I said, well, they're different than yours. I said, it's playing with my grandchildren. It's playing more golf. It's playing piano. It's traveling with my wife and enjoying life. So, yeah, that's for me. But I think what's on the big horizon, it's both enticing and absolutely frightening, is AI, artificial intelligence. That has the capacity to upend our world completely. But here's a gentleman I've gotten to know, Martin Lindstrom, who's one of the leading marketing thinkers and doers and leaders of our world. He runs the Lindstrom Company, which is a marketing firm. And he said, we have to get involved in AI because the dark forces are already there. So people with good intentions have to become involved so we can shape it. So AI is not on the horizon, it's here, and it's only getting smarter and smarter and smarter. So that's the big challenge. But I want to always believe we'll still need that human connection. We've been doing that for millennia. I don't expect that to change. But the way we work is different. It's changed. And how we integrate AI will be another challenge. But I'm confident that we humans will kind of figure it out one way or another. We learn to manage nuclear weapons. I think we can learn to manage AI. Let's put it that way.
Do you have any final words for our audience of workplace decisions?
Yes, and I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to read you a little poem that's in my book, Grace Under Pressure. And so what is grace under pressure? If you'll bear with me. Grace under pressure means meeting anger with composure, denigration with respect, sadness with compassion, scarcity with abundance, insults with smiles, selfishness with selflessness, hoarding with generosity, life with gratitude. That's grace under pressure.
Thank you, John Baldoni. What a fantastic moment to finish on. You've given us so much to think about there as how we apply grace to the workplace today and its connections with how we're working. Some of these ideas being very constant and others being things we're freshly challenged with and thinking about again. So really appreciate your time today and ability to share these thoughts with us. Thank you.
Well, Nina, it has been my honor. You are a superb host, and you made it easy for me by asking questions that challenged my thinking, and I hope I proffered a few good answers there.
Absolutely. It's been a great conversation. Thank you.
My pleasure.